Okay, I'm gonna be totally honest with you guys. I don't think I would be where I'm at right now if I did not learn how to engineer early on in my career.
Bolo!
Hey, before we get started, if you guys need any equipment for your studio so you can start on your production or your engineering journey, make sure you guys go ahead and click that link in the description and head over to Zounds.com. Zounds has a whole bunch of stuff on the site, and they have a ton of items on the site that you guys can get with no credit or background check, meaning you can just order it, they'll ship it to you, and you can just pay it using monthly installments. All you just need is a credit or debit card hooked to the account. So if you guys need any equipment, go ahead and click my link in the description right now and head over to Zounds.com and get you some equipment today. All right, so I'm going to give you guys a quick story about my life, and hopefully this will help you guys out. I'm going to try not to do too many cuts and breaks. I want to keep this as raw as possible so you guys can understand where I'm coming from. Now, when I started doing music, I was 20 years old, so I was actually a late bloomer. And when I started doing it, the first thing I did and the first thing I pretty much learned is how to record people. Now, I wanted to rap, but I was not a good rapper. I wanted to sing, and I was not a good singer. So the best thing for me to do was to find talent and to record it. And then at that time, press up some CDs and try to sell it, which that's what I did on my college campus. I was always the type of person who tried to find talent, record talent, and tried to sell that product. But one thing I did learn in doing that process is I started meeting more and more people that wanted to record. And one thing I did notice during that time is a lot of these people did not have beats at the time. See, back then, people did produce music and people did do music like that, but there were not that many producers at that time because back in that day, you had to, have real equipment. Now, I was one of the few people that were producing on a laptop back then, but a lot of people were still using hardware at that time. And for you to be a producer, you had to have some type of money, or you had to know somebody who had some money, or you had to come up on something. I'm not saying how you came up on it, but you had to come up on some type of equipment. But I did have a laptop at the time that was sponsored by the school, and I learned how to produce that way. And I was a decent producer. I was still learning. But with me being an engineer, knowing that these people needed beats, I started producing while I was engineering. And so that's how I pretty much got my start in the game as being a producer. But in all actuality, I was still an engineer. So what I was doing at the time was I was finding artists and I was producing the artists and I was engineering all the sessions. And then what was happening was people were listening to the sessions and all the recordings and everything that we were doing. And then people started hitting up the number when I had the little information on the CDs, and they were calling back not to book us or nothing like that. A lot of people were calling back to see about recording and getting beats. And at first I kind of, was not really with it at that point. But then over time, I said, hey, let me just try to get a few people in here and just, see how it is. So I started charging $20 an hour to record people. So I remember my first session was 2 hours. The guy came and he paid me the $40 once we got done. He did, I think he did 2 songs. He was a guy from Mississippi. He was living in the city at that time, and he ended up doing 2 songs. And he needed a beat for the 3rd song that he had. And then I was like, hey, I got some beats too. If you want to check them out, you don't have to go, online and try to get like instrumentals. You can get you a real beat because he actually recorded over instrumentals from popular records. So I played him some of my beats and he actually liked 2 of the beats. And he was like, yo, how much would you charge me to rap over these beats? Like, I want to buy these beats from you. And I really didn't know what to say. So I was like, just give me $50 for both of them. And he was like, bet, let's go ahead and do it. When can I set up my next session? And I was like, we could set it up right now. He was like, well, I can't do it today. I want to come back maybe in a couple of days and, do it. So he ended up coming back a few days later. He ended up paying me another $40. And then he came in and paid me actually $75 for the beats. He actually paid me $75. He gave me a little tip. And that was my introduction into, hey, I can actually really make some money recording people and selling beats. Now, during that time when I was in Alabama going to school, I ended up developing like a little bit of a clientele where I had people coming in and out of my apartment, recording, and I ended up making very good money for a college student because, if I'm making an extra $200 a week as a college student, that's like, that's like you're in the big time at that point. And I was making pretty much like an extra $200, sometimes an extra $500 a week recording. And a lot of times I did not sell beats, but I had beats on hand and I actually used that to bring people in. So what I was doing was I was making beats. I was letting people hear my beats and I was saying, hey, if you want to come record with me, you can record on one of my beats and I will give you a deal. And that's what I started doing. And then I started getting more and more people in. And then by the time I ended up moving back home to Florida in 2005, I pretty much had a pretty good grip on like recording and selling beats at the same time. So I actually set up my own little studio in the back of my dad's house. I had a 10 by 12 shed that I built into a studio. At the jump, what I started doing was I started calling a whole bunch of people and I let them know I had a studio in the back of my dad's house and let's get some songs and let's record. So at first, what I was doing in Florida, I started just recording a whole bunch of people. And at the end of the sessions, I would play my beats. Sometimes people liked the beats. Sometimes people didn't like the beats, but it gave me an opportunity to play my beats because they were now in the studio. And even though I was recording more people than selling beats, it would set me up from time to time for me to actually sell beats. Now, the cool thing about this is while I was recording people, they were bringing other people in to feature. And then it would be just like local talent, bringing in local talent. Then pretty soon it started being local talent, bringing on somebody who maybe had a name in the area or somebody who had a name throughout the state of Florida at that time, or somebody who was kind of buzzing at that time would hit me up and they would start recording. So I think one of the first people that I actually recorded that had like a pretty big name that was in Florida, my guy Tom actually brought by the guy Fred that was on Making of the Band. He actually came by my house. I think I made the beat for that session and they recorded on that beat. And I end up like talking to him about beats and stuff like that. And this was in 2005. It was a long time ago, but it kind of set me up for more and more people to come in after they heard the song with him and Fred on it. They heard the song, so more and more people were like, hey, where'd you record that song at? And who did the beat? By word of mouth, people were starting to come in and they were starting to inquire about not only my engineering services, but for my beat services as well. And then that's how I ultimately ended up getting like my first like big record was I started recording the artist Two Pistols. I started recording him first. And then from time to time, I would get him some beats and stuff like that because my guy actually hooked us up. And then I started feeding him some beats and then he would come through, he would pay me for the beats and then he would record for the studio time. And he was one of the first people to like really pay me really good. Like he was paying me like $300-$400 a track at that time. And then, of course, that kind of got me hyped up. So I was just steady just making beats so I can get him to come in and record on some beats and hopefully it would go somewhere. And then over time, I started doing that with more and more people. And then with me knowing how to engineer, I would get the bulk of everything because I'm not only getting the engineering money, I would get the money for the beats as well. And with the engineering, it opened so many other doors because now people wanted me to come to other studios. And even though that they liked a particular studio, they wanted me to come there to engineer because they liked my style of engineering because I learned from some really good guys when I was in college. Shout out to Ty Cutter, shout out to DJ Stickerbush. Those guys, really kind of helped me out, starting on my music journey. Shout out to Alley Cat. those guys really kind of helped me on my music journey by letting me sit in and kind of see what they're doing. And it helped me out by just engineering and just really learning how to produce. So by the time I did that record for Two Pistols, I made the beat, and then I made the beat again, and I engineered it. And then we ended up putting the song out, and the song did pretty cool. And then he decided one day, he was like, yo, I want to get T-Pain on this particular song. And he went, he got the bread up, he paid T-Pain to get on the song. I ended up producing the song again. We ended up getting the vocals and everything on it. And then we put the song out. And then pretty much that really kind of like helped me out a lot. It helped me out a huge bit. And that song ended up being a big underground hit until he signed his deal with the Justice League, and they ended up remaking the beat over, and then they did their edition of that beat. But it really helped me out so much because a lot of people, like my beat as well, and it put me on the map. So at that time, I was making a lot of beats. I was engineering for a lot of people, and I decided I needed to move somewhere bigger so I can expand what I was doing. So I ended up moving up here to Atlanta. My goal was just to be up here for like a year or two, just kind of fill it out, and then head back home and then take my talents back home and try to blow up, back home. But when I got here, I noticed a lot of people needed a good engineer. Now, I had beats, I had everything on deck, but they weren't paying me like as much as they were paying me in Florida. Like Atlanta had so many other producers. It was a vast majority of way more producers here, a lot of great engineers here, a lot of studios here. So when I got here, I opened up a studio, and one of the main selling points for me getting artists in was saying, hey, I know how to engineer. I have some pretty decent prices. At the time when I moved here in 2007, I started off at $35 an hour, and I was going to all the open mics and everything. And then I was just telling people, hey, I engineer. I'll let you come in here for an hour for free. I'll show you guys, how I do it. And then you can decide what you want to go from there. So for pretty much about 2.5 months, I really didn't get paid from none of my sessions because I was just bringing people in. And then over time, I started getting paid sessions from word of mouth because even though I had flyers and stuff, people were telling other people about what I was doing because I would engineer, get them in and out really quick. Sometimes I get some guys, they would do 2 songs an hour. Some people do 3 songs in an hour. I'll put a nice little mix on it and they'll be in and out. And then next, they were telling other people like, hey, I just went to this guy named Bolo. He engineered my session and he makes beats too, because at the end of the sessions, I would play my beats. And that way I kind of built up a nice little clientele to where I was making, at that time, I was making close to about 800 to about, some good weeks to probably like 1,500. So it was taking care of my rent, it was taking care of my cars, taking care of the family. I was good. It really helped me out because now when I was engineering so much, I was playing beats, and then every so often somebody say, hey, I like that beat. I want to go ahead and get that. So the more and more people started coming in, they were starting to inquire about, engineering, but they were starting to inquire about beats as well, because I was always playing beats and I had some pretty decent beats at the time. That's why a lot of times when people talk to me, I kind of tell them that I'm more of an engineer that just so happens to make beats than a producer who knows how to engineer. And with me having that engineering background, I was not only engineering at my spot, then I was actually engineering at other spots as well. Because with certain artists, say for instance, they wanted to get in the vibe of like going to a bigger studio, they would call me and say, hey, Bolo, we're going to this other studio with these, other artists. And I like how you engineer my voice. How much would you charge to travel to another studio and record? And I'd be like, hey, just pay me the same amount you would pay me at my spot, and I'll come there and I'll record you. You know what I'm saying? So I would do that. And then while I was there, they were like, hey, Bolo, you got some beats or something with you? And I would pull up beats and I would play beats for certain people. And a lot of times some people actually, like the beats, and sometimes they wouldn't. But I would be able to play my beats because I got booked to engineer. And then at that time, I was engineering for a artist that was actually signed to Young Jeezy. He would come to my spot, Bama. His name is Bama. He would come to my spot. I would make the beats. He would record on them. Jeezy and them set out a budget, and they would pay me the budget, and then he would bring other producers in, and then that's how I got to meet Sonny Digital, and I got to meet a lot of other people. I got to meet TB Hits, who works for Ariana Grande. He was doing a lot of beats at that time before he moved out to California. I got to meet a lot of people at that time, and then I got to meet a lot of other artists that were on the label as well, and I got to play beats and stuff like that because of my engineering background. And, that kind of catapulted me in a sense to where it was actually people were coming more for my production because they were hearing my production on mixtapes. I had beat CDs floating around the streets. I had, my contact information on everything. I was showing up to these open mics. I was playing my beats. I was going to beat battles. I was doing all that. But at the same time, a lot of people noticed that even though I was playing my beats sounded nice, full, rich. They were mixed really good. And a lot of people was asking who mixed the beats. And it was like, I was like, me. I'm the one that mixed it, and I record as well. So when I would go to these events, I would meet up with people. Then people would contact me to come to the studio. We would work. I would make beats, and I would be making beats constantly while I'm engineering, making beats, engineering. Sometimes I would get in there early, make some beats before the session came in so I could play fresh beats. And then that way I would kind of build up more and more of my production catalog along with my recording catalog. As time went on, that really kind of helped me out because during the recession, it was very hard. It was very tough. A lot of people were losing their businesses. It kept me afloat. Because you got to think I was going from like $4,000 a month down to like, it was like sometimes like $2,500, $3,000 a month. So it was a big pay cut, but it made enough for me to survive during the recession. And once we came out of the recession, with my engineering background, it really helped me out in 2014 because my biggest years of production and everything was like 2014 to 2018. That was like my 4 year. That was like my big time during those 4 years. That's how I ended up meeting Doe B, which I ended up producing 3 on his album at the time, on that Baby Jesus album. And he was huge throughout the South. He was going to be one of the biggest, man, like one of the biggest. And I got introduced to him through engineering. The guy who owned the studio where Doe B was at, he was like, hey, T.I. and them are going to be here. He's going to bring one of his artists through, and you might need to engineer tonight. I'm not really too sure, but, if you want to come by, it would be kind of cool. So I, got there. Next time I seen Doe B get out the car, and I remember he had a song already out at the time. I was like, hey, what's good? It was all cool. And then that night, I ended up making 2 beats with him that night. That really kind of blew me up throughout the South with that song because he had that song, those 3 songs on that album was so big, and that mixtape was so big at the time. And it really kind of put me on a whole nother dimension when he came out. And then, fast forward to my biggest record with Silento, the Watch Me Whip, Watch Me Nay Nay record. I produced that song. I recorded that song. I mixed that song. I put the song together, flew all the ad libs, put the whole song together. And without me not having that engineering background, I don't know if I could have did that. And even to this day, if you go to iTunes, Spotify, whatever, my exact mix and master is on Spotify, iTunes, whatever, because the record label just kept that on there, and they used the Jason Joshua mix for our shows, for movies, television, and for the radio. But for anything on the DSPs, if you go listen to that song right now, that is my exact mix from when I finished it and when I uploaded that in January of 2015. So with my engineering background, it really helped me out to get into a lot of situations and for me to showcase my beats. And I really want to tell you guys, from that point to a few placements that we did with him being featured on, with Silento being featured on, and then me even working with the Taylor Girls, I produced, I recorded those songs, mixed some of the songs, put the songs out. And even to this day, a lot of times when I do sessions, I tell them don't book an engineer. If you want to pay an engineer, you can pay me. But a lot of times what I do is if we book sessions for me to produce, I will engineer those sessions because I trust what I'm doing, and that way I can work with that artist a certain way without, an engineer just clicking buttons. I'm the type of person that likes to give input. I'm very talkative during my sessions. I like things a certain way, so I would want somebody to move at the speed that I'm working at. Even though there's a lot of great engineers who work fast, but a lot of them are working fast by clicking buttons rather than clicking buttons and giving insight at the same time. So if you guys are producers and you want to get into the door and you want to, meet up with other artists and everything, I implore you to learn how to engineer. As you guys heard my story, it really helps out to learn how to do that. It will open up so many doors that you can get into because everybody is always looking for an engineer. It is not an easy job. I'm gonna tell you right now, it's not an easy job because sometimes you'll be working long days, long nights. Sometimes you get paid, sometimes you don't get paid. But while you're in there with certain artists. And I know for a fact, if I did not engineer, I would not have been in certain places with certain artists. So I could be able to even at some point play my beats. Because trust me, without me knowing how to engineer, I would have not have been in those situations. So I'm telling you, if you want to get a fast track on getting to certain artists or trying to get major placements or trying to work with artists, learn how to engineer. If you have a program, I don't care if it's FL, I don't care if it's Cubase, I don't care if it's Logic or whatever, Pro Tools, whatever. Learn how to engineer. I don't care if you record yourself. I don't care if you just record some homeboys or homegirls or whatever you want to do. Learn how to engineer because I'm telling you guys right now, it will get you in the door a lot faster than you just running up to people saying, hey, I got dope beats. Okay. A lot of times if you engineer pretty good, some people will at least give you a chance to play some beats. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, learn how to engineer, get good at it. Try to get into some doors, and then hopefully you can play your beats for some people, and hopefully you'll turn out like me. Hopefully someday. Well, not like me totally, but you know what I mean. But I hope this was informative. Hope you guys learned something from it. And like I always say, peace out.